Hello everybody, and welcome back to RPG Horror Stories. I'm Firestar, and I hope that you enjoy your stay. Today our stories focus a little bit more on the dungeon masters of our games, and how some of them might abuse their power and force their players into situations that they don't really want to be in. Without further ado, let's get into it. Our first horror story is titled, Our DM Kidnapped Us and Gave Us No Chance of Escape or Other Options Besides Signing a Contract. Posted by you/Itchy Apollone. We have been playing this campaign for a few months now, and nothing like this has happened before. It all began when we were traveling through the woods and we noticed a shadowy figure behind us. When we turned to investigate it, we ended up surrounded by a dome of darkness that began to inch closer towards us. For about 20 minutes we tried to break free from it. We engulfed it in magical light, weapon attacks did nothing, spells did nothing, and in fact made it even stronger. The magical sword that was the focal point of the campaign as an artifact that allowed someone to ascend to godhood did nothing. Eventually, I, a rogue, used my ring of light and tried to run through the darkness, but it completely engulfed me and I lost all sense of direction. Tendrils ended up wrapping around me before I got spit out at the entrance of the Cave of Wonders. Yes, literally, the Cave of Wonders from Aladdin. I was moved to a separate call while I waited for my party to arrive. Apparently, my party spent the next 10 minutes or so attempting all sorts of ways to not be engulfed. They just had to keep making acrobatics checks to avoid the tendrils, and one member even rolled a 20 to avoid them. They continued rolling the checks until they all ended up failing and were thrown out of the darkness where I was waiting. We decide to enter the Cave of Wonders as the Dome of Darkness is preventing us from doing literally anything else. In the cave, we find our DM's self-insert edgy author. He talks about how he can write anything into existence, and I asked him to write me to be cooler, which he responds by giving me a robot arm and then undoing it. He says he was forced to write for all of eternity as punishment from a god. As we continue to talk to him and glance around the room, we notice that he has 5 human hearts on altars. When asked about them, he responds with vague riddles. Actually, the self-insert demigod author only responded in vague riddles. Upon investigating the hearts, we find that they're our hearts, the party's hearts, on altars in the Cave of Wonders. Eventually, the questioning leads to edgelord author presenting a contract written in Abyssal, which none of us could read, and he said that the only way for us to be free was to sign it. We had to ritual cast comprehend languages, and even after that, our DM said that the wizard must be touching the contract in order to read it. The edgelord author played keep away until finally giving in. The contract read, "Kill the masked man. As a reward, I will write 2 things in my book for you." At this point in the story, all we know about this masked man is a ripped page from a journal that we found about different magical masks. So of course we're not signing this vague contract to kill someone who we know nothing about. We can't come to any terms, and the edgelord author refuses to budge, so we start to attack him. We spend another 20 minutes wailing on this guy. We burn spell slots, I used 2 arrows of slaying on him. In total, we did about 300 damage. And on his turns, he would counterspell us, cast Sleet Storm to break our concentration, cast Irresistible Dance on us, and poke our hearts, dealing a damage. The edgelord author kept saying how this could all be over if we just signed the contract. Eventually, I had enough, and said that I would sign it if he kept the rest of the party out of it, and he agreed. I signed the paper as the DM described the ink changing from reading Caspian to Ace Arcana, our party's name. After that, he ended the session, left the call, and hasn't answered any of our messages since then. The party and I are very confused. He's been a very good DM before all of this, allowing us to do what we want, improving things on the fly, creating PC-specific events and magic items, so this is just completely out of the blue. The only thing that he said since last night is, sometimes you have to do things for the plot. What? The plot's been good so far, so a self-insert demigod railroad, A, isn't plot, and B, is actually derailing the plot. TLDR, our party was kidnapped by magical darkness with no chance of escape or alternate options. Our DM forced us to sign a contract written by his self-insert demigod, and his only explanation for it is, sometimes you have to do things for the plot. Yeah, that's not too great of a move from the DM. Railroading in my books is not the worst thing in the world, but it is something that, as a dungeon master or game master, you have to do very carefully. It's not something that you can just force on your players because it takes away agency and makes people feel like they're just stuck doing whatever you want, when Dungeons & Dragons, or any role-playing game really, is a collaborative experience. And even though as the Dungeon Master it can be very difficult to at least give the illusion of choice, it is a very important aspect of playing the game. For me anyways, having the illusion of choice to do what I want is one of the biggest reasons that I really enjoy role-playing games. I like to think that I can have an effect on the world and change things in a meaningful way, even if we end up getting to a very similar conclusion that was going to happen from the beginning, but the journey there doesn't need to be the same. And as a comment puts it, the DM did not do this very well. Letting the party waste 30 minutes pretending they can escape the darkness was a bad mistake, and he should have just made it a cutscene at that point. Dropping his author on you and forcing you to sign a contract out of nowhere was also a bad move. You need to do setup for shit like that. It works a lot better if you introduce the character first, or at least inform the party of their existence, and then organically put the party in an impossible situation. Make the party call on this guy, and/or have the guy rescue the party from the situation that you put them in. Like, make no mistake, all of the above is still very railroady, but at least it feels slightly more reasonable for the players. Doing it like your DM did is basically just a "and now for something completely different" gag from Monty Python, and it's jarring as hell. Alternatively, you could do the proper stage setting for "this area is spooky" and then gradually hatch up the tension until they get grabbed by the darkness. Bonus if you give them a valid campaign-centered reason to go to the spooky place, and in-world drop hints about the spooky man that you wouldn't be railroading. I think they do put it well. It gives a more organic way for the players to get into this very same scenario that the DM clearly wanted to happen, but just very much forced on them. If you had some sort of build-up or some sort of slightly more organic way to do it, I think it would have felt much better. Our second horror story is titled, Forced to Play an Item Instead of Playing My Character, posted by u/astralfall777. This story happened in the last campaign where I was a player and not the Dungeon Master. This story serves as less of a horror story and more as a lesson in game balance and making things fun for the party. So, some friends and I started a campaign about a year ago. The DM was new to DMing, but was a longtime player and knew the basics of DMing. We started off and created our characters. Now, the mechanics and roles of each character is integral to understanding why this is a horror story. Mu, a newer player, a thief rogue who attacked from 30 feet with crossbows, a Kenku who mostly focused on small sneak attacks, Exodus, veteran player, feral tiefling monk, run in, get quick strikes, he functioned like the party tank. Chichu, veteran DM and player, an interesting concept, 4 characters in one. Rolled a d4 at the start of each day to see who he was. There was a barb tank, a cleric healer, an attack wizard, and a scared ranger. V, my character, an Aarakocra Gloomstalker Ranger Fey Talisman Warlock who used magic guns granted by her patron. She was a sniper as she would try to stay as far out of the action as possible due to no armor or HP. This horror story started at roughly Act 3 of our campaign. The entire countryside had been basically consumed by the BBEG's horde, and right as the capital was taken, the party was quested to go find the 4 lost artifacts. We were flown away by an ancient gold dragon who we had befriended, long story, and found ourselves at a prehistoric crater. The 4 quadrants of the crater had 4 different biomes, each with their own artifact. The first artifact that we got was an earth one. It was a cape for Exodus that functioned as arms. His unarmed attacks now had 20-foot range and dealt extra damage. As well as when he used patient defense, he could go Juggernaut and become resistant to all damage for 3 turns at the cost of doing less damage. The next artifact was the water artifact, a pair of gauntlets that Chichu wore. They allowed him to control which character he became each day, as well as create, control, freeze, and breathe water. He also gained a super powerful once-a-day spell, and on top of that, they counted as spellcasting focuses. The third artifact was a pair of air daggers for Mu. They allowed him to fly, as well as giving him sneak attack on all attacks with advantage. On top of that, he could even disengage as a free action now, and cast a wind blast to push everything around him back 10 feet. Then, there was my artifact. A fire sword. It seemed cool at first, but it was the complete opposite of what my character was. It had a range of 5 feet and was a melee weapon, meaning that I had a +3 to hit compared to the +11 to hit that I had from my ranged weapons and I had been investing in all game. It dealt 2d6 fire damage on a hit, which was way less than even my weakest gun at this point. The only other feature was a once-a-day firestorm that dealt 2d10 to everyone within 10 feet of me. Now, this became a huge problem. While the other artifacts forced the characters to find new, creative ways to play, I felt limited by mine. I went from attacking with my guns 80 feet away as a sniper to suddenly attacking from 5 foot and missing every hit. All of my guns were suddenly resisted by the enemies. My usual flying away would be countered by teleporting enemies. I felt trapped by my artifact because I couldn't play the character that I had made. There was one other feature, though, that ruined the artifacts for me alone. Twice per day, you could essentially druid wild shape into the elemental of your artifact. On top of this, you would keep all class features except casting spells. The other characters benefited hugely from this, as they now had extra bulk, more damage, and options. However, the fire elemental had no range. All of my class features and race features were focused on range, and I now had a +2 to hit on attacks that dealt less damage than everyone else. This wouldn't have mattered had the game not shifted to being centered around our artifacts. Soon, enemies were built around the notion that we could use elementals each battle, meaning that they did a lot more damage. I was forced into using my artifact that wasn't fun for me, because if I didn't, I would probably die. And soon, I grew tired of it. I tried to drop a new character under the hopes that maybe the DM would do something else. As throughout the process, despite talking to him heavily outside of the game about how I felt limited by my artifact and that I wasn't having fun, he changed little to nothing and just said, "The artifacts are supposed to push you out of your character's comfort zone." Eventually, the party confronted the Act 3 main boss and the fight started. I went first, as by this point my initiative bonus had hit +11. However, I did not want to go into Elemental as I didn't find it fun. Next up was the boss, who proceeded to do just under double of my max HP. We eventually won, but V was essentially killed, having her wings and legs torn off. In the end, the artifact was awful for me, and was the downfall of the campaign for me. The others had a lot of fun, but it made me resent the DM. Had he tried to retcon or change the fundamentals of the artifact, maybe I could have had fun, but because it was, by nature, the opposite of everything that I made my character to be, it sucked the joy out of the campaign. TLDR, DM makes artifact that is the exact opposite of what my character is, and does little to help it before unceremoniously killing off my character. So, I want to point out very quickly that the boss proceeding to do just under double max HP, the only reason that this is somewhat relevant to this story is because doubling the max HP that the character has kills them outright. But I think that this character's death was even more unceremonious because the boss didn't even instantly kill them and left them to do death saving throws and brutalize this poor character who was supposed to be at range and was built to be at range, who probably shouldn't have even been within the big bad evil guy's clutches like they were if they had continued to play their character as they should have been. But the DM basically nerfed their character and forced them to work in close range, which is just awful on the DM's part, and I feel like the DM may not have accounted for having a PC who could work very well off of range, and wanted to use the artifact and forced this player to use the artifact so that way they could actually hit their character and fight against them in more melee combat, because it's difficult to do ranged combat and it's difficult to balance for ranged combat as a dungeon master sometimes, especially if you are throwing enemies at the characters who do not have very good range. So, as a dungeon master, I can understand from a certain point of view that it can get a little bit frustrating dealing with characters who are ranged when you don't have a good counter to them. But there are far better ways to counter ranged characters than just saying, you can't actually do ranged anymore. Screw you, basically. That's when you, as a dungeon master, should begin to come up with more strategy for your enemies. And if your characters and your ranged characters who are usually out of the fight have to start worrying about, kobolds or goblins strategizing against them, there's ways around it without completely limiting how your players are playing their characters and how they want to play. It really isn't fair to allow a character to be a ranged character and then to completely nerf them just because, I don't know, you don't want to deal with trying to fight them, or maybe you're just sick of the player or the character. Our third and partially final horror story is titled, Had a Nightmare of a Session Last Week, Now Thinking of Dropping from My Group of 9 Years. Posted by Gero Geppetto. This story comes in 2 parts. One from the player's perspective, and the second from the DM's weigh-in. We will be investigating the DM's weigh-in after we go through the player's perspective. Minor spoilers for Waterdeep Dragon Heist. Okay, so for context, this group has been playing for a long time now, and we are down to 5 members, a DM and 4 players. For the vast majority of the group's lifetime, we have typically had the same DM, who we'll call Alex. For the last 2 campaigns, I took the reins, and ran Rime of the Frost Maiden and Curse of Strahd. Now Alex is DMing Dragon Heist for us. So, we belt out the expectations and make some characters who can get along with each other. This has been coming up as an issue lately. I make a chaotic good bard rogue who, similar to the Mask, will have a chaotic neutral persona that takes over from time to time. It hasn't happened in session yet. Alex hates bards, but allows it along with a chaotic neutral artificer, a neutral cleric, and a lawful good fighter. We play for about 4 sessions, and everyone is having a good time and making merry. The only gripe that I have is whenever I try to do something, nothing happens. For example, I disguise self as a hooded bandit similar to one that we're tailing, and combat starts the moment that we are seen casually walking through a door into a room with them. They didn't even have to make an intelligence check because it looked too similar to them. Or I cast Skywrite to advertise our new tavern, and it has no effect at all. The DM jokes that everyone knows that spell, so there are Skywrite and graffiti everywhere. I use my enthralling performance to charm fans into getting more friends to come to our tavern, and nothing happens. I insult a bandit captain who is in the middle of fighting the party and an NPC, and everyone in the bar now knows for a fact that I cast Vicious Mockery, and am actively trying to kill this man in their eyes. Fast forward to last session. We have tracked the culprit of an explosion who killed 11 people to a building with a gated yard. We also have a device that whirs when the culprit is near, and it was going crazy. The fighter and artificer try the front gate but aren't getting an answer, so the cleric and I decide to go check the back. I cast invisibility on myself first, and we find a locked back entrance to some stables. I pick the lock, head in, and eventually walk into the yard, where an old man and 2 dogs immediately see me. I hold my hands up and spin a tale about how I drank a potion and found myself here wandering invisibly. The old man tells me to drop the spell, and I say, actually, I'll just be going now, and make for the exit. Initiative is rolled, and a dog runs up to me and bites me, no disadvantage even though I'm invisible, because he can see me. The invisible condition has been run as written for 9 years up until this point, and knocks me to the ground while everyone is still outside. It looks like my character is about to die when the old man casts the command spell on me and tells me to leave. I pass the save but try to leave anyway, still in turn order. I open the door leading out, and the cleric is standing there, so I walk past him like it's no big deal. Next round, the man sicks the dogs on us, and I take the ready action to attack with my rapier if a dog goes after the cleric. A dog dashed up to the cleric aggressively, so I stabbed it and killed it instantly. The old man became intractable and tried to kill me with inflict wounds. I immediately said, "Buy yourself a new dog," mockingly, while flipping him a copper, casting Vicious Mockery, but he passed the save. So we spent the next 3 rounds trying to talk him down. Eventually, the other 2 arrive and see us trying to smooth things over, and the lawful good fighter derails the session by getting upset and yelling, "I made a mistake thinking I could play a lawful character with this group. I'm making a new evil character now because my character would arrest the bard." At this point, the DM is listing off all the crimes I've committed in their sentences, including damage to property. I apparently broke the lock when I picked it with thieves' tools with a 25 and didn't hear about it until now. Using magic to influence a citizen, I cast invisibility. Damaging livestock, fair enough. Assault, Vicious Mockery, which is explicitly subtle as per the spell description. Intimidating, we offered to pay 150 gold for the dog and settle outside of court. And murder without justification, 1 point of damage from Vicious Mockery, and the guy is still alive. Alex the DM has had a penchant for being an adversarial DM before, and the fact that literally everything I try to do just fizzles out, gets ignored, or is now considered a serious crime makes me not want to play his game anymore. The lawful good fighter throws a fit like this once per campaign, no matter who is DMing or playing, so I'm not really upset about what he does. So, we talk for an hour after sesh, and Alex leaves without saying much of anything. Everyone agreed that he doesn't let me do anything, and all we did is talk about the intricacies of the alignment chart and didn't really get anywhere. So next session, we'll probably be taken out of our current situation and told what happened while we aren't in control of our characters. I'm at the point where I don't really want to play a session where I defend my character in court just to lose him forever. Especially since the description of the spells that got me into trouble are prone to changing at the whim of our Draconian DM explicitly to fuck me over. The sad part is, they will likely not want to play as a party of 3, and me leaving will destroy the group. I've just had enough of this DM for now. TLDR, we broke into a place housing a terrorist/mass murderer and killed a dog. Now my character is facing 50 years in prison due to bullshit DMing, and I don't feel like playing the game anymore. Now, before we get into discussing this post, we will actually go over what the DM has to say. Hey y'all, Alex here. OP's post is not completely unfounded, however I do heavily disagree with most of his interpretations of events. As a story with a 9-year background, it leaves out far too much context to explain over a Reddit post. Anyways, since OP and I's attempts at discussing this seems fruitless, I thought that I would share my view. Alex hates bards. No, I don't. They are my least favorite class personally to play, and I don't find all the bang the dragon memes to be very funny. However, I have no issues playing with bards in my parties or running games with bards in them. The Skywrite joke. Our group frequently slips in and out of in-game talk pretty easily and without borders. That joke was exactly that, and did not factor negatively into the bard's actions in any way. The instance that OP is speaking on has much more context. Outside of the party's new business, a tavern and inn/burlesque, a fireball from an unknown source had killed multiple people. The party was talking about holding a vigil that same night for the victims at their tavern. Both in and out of game, most of the party was treating the event as a joke. OP was the only one who put any real effort into the event, buying candles for the vigil for patrons to use, at a cost, skywriting an advert to let the city know about the event, and using enthralling performance to get followers to spread the word. I've been using the running a business D100 table from the DMG to determine profits. The roll to determine the success of the event had a hefty -20 penalty due to the community not perceiving the event to be in good faith, newcomers to the neighborhood using a local tragedy to make a quick cash grab. However, I did give the roll advantage for all of OP's efforts, but it still did not turn out well. The main event. OP's invisibility being seen was my mistake as the DM. In my head, I for some reason thought that spirit-based creatures could see invisibility. I am now aware that they cannot. Probably due to a mix-up in my brain over etherealness and invisibility. The groundskeeper and the dogs are actually shadows in this case, again, my mistake on thinking they could see the OP. The groundkeeper and dogs attack, as the module states that they immediately do if they spot intruders. It looks like his character is about to die. He had taken a grand total of 4 damage before the groundskeeper called off the dog and used the command spell to command OP to leave. As stated, OP started heading for the exit to the yard and went behind the cleric, readying an action to attack if they attacked. Still in initiative order, it was one of the dog's turns, and I had it move towards the players to follow them out. It did not attack, though, but I did use the term aggressiveness as it was a guard mastiff doing its guard duties. OP declares they're ready to attack, and I clarify the dog is not attacking to make sure that OP still wants to attack, and he says he does. He kills the dog in one attack. The part about flipping a coin and vicious mockery is as stated, conveniently leaving out that the coin came from a stolen money box that OP had stolen from the very property this was going down on. So OP essentially killed a guard dog after being given a chance to clarify and not do so, and then mocked its grieving owner with his own stolen money. The rest of the party tried talking the old man down, making awful persuasion rolls in the process, unfortunately, while the OP continued to use vicious mockery round after round and the old man continued to attack back ineffectively. Keep in mind the cleric is still between the two of them, and OP had the opportunity on each of his turns to simply leave out the open door behind him. The lawful good fighter had plenty of reason to be irritated in this moment, as during Session 0, one of the player's stipulations was that he only wanted to run this character if the rest of the party was willing to not break too many laws in the city. Fighter has also been good about turning a blind eye to crimes that he deems not too offensive. I did start listing off the crimes and their potential punishments. At this point, the entire session had broken down, and there were 4 people all talking over each other. I was listing the crimes that I had seen committed: breaking and entering, theft, destruction of livestock, and attempted murder. OP was still denying any and all of these crimes. Again, this was all meta as well. As of this point, the character has still faced no actual charges or repercussions besides the party getting upset with the decision to continue attacking the old man. Other context. I do admit to being an adversarial DM over the years, and I've been working on not restricting or punishing players as much. I currently have no plans for OP's character via arresting them, which was another player suggestion, or retconning the situation. I wish that these long-standing grievances had been brought to me before the boiling point of OP quitting and just hoping things would get better, because we are all adults and can speak about our issues with each other. Yes, we do plan on continuing to play with 3 players. It sounds quite nice, even though the entire group agrees that we would rather see OP continuing to play. This is, as stated in the post title, a 9-year group that started with 12 players who all had little to no experience in the game. Most early sessions were played drunk and high, and all of us have been shitty players or DMs at certain points. Characters would be literally named Butthole just to troll the DM. There were characters who the rest of the party couldn't stand without breaking the immersions of their own character. PvP, adversarial DMing, we've pretty much seen it all, good and bad. So, yeah, that is quite the double whammy on the story from both points of view. I won't go too deeply into it, but I do think that both sides of the story have rights to complain and to kind of air out their grievances. I don't really think that it necessarily should have been posted for everyone to judge and to basically put the DM on blast, but I understand that the original poster was probably just frustrated with how things went and how they perceived things to be going, especially if Alex, the DM, seemed to be very adversarial. I know that it can be very difficult to communicate with someone like that, or to feel like you can talk with them and actually get things done and changed, but it is interesting seeing the DM's point of view as well, and getting a bit more context on why these things happened, and sort of being able to form a more whole opinion about this game as a whole. It is nice that the game seems like it will continue to go on with 3 players, and it's unfortunate that OP doesn't want to continue playing. But with all that kind of boiled up, I hope that it will be good for all of them, and their friendships to go these separate ways with Tabletop for a while, and maybe to try and meet up at some other point when feelings are not as hurt or as high. But that will do it for our RPG horror stories. I hope that you all enjoyed, and please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Have a good one.